Local Republicans' perspective tonight.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
You know, it's funny, over the last couple of visits with Minority Leader Blake Filippi, he has kind of suggested that the focus ought to be on the local stuff, you know, because there's so much going on in our State House that always needs an address. But I have lured him into a couple of broader conversations on the president, on impeachment and the like. And I'm going to lure him in again before we talk about some important local issues, because you crave it. I know instinctively you crave hearing a perspective different than mine and different than some of the pundits that we've had on here on a continuous basis who see impeachment as valid, legitimate, and perhaps even necessary. So, having said that, we welcome you in on this dreary Monday evening. That old adage about if you don't like the weather in New England, wait 30 seconds, I think is going to be ultimately true. We're getting 50-degree weather and rain today. It's going to get to 60 tomorrow, pouring. Then it's going to get to 30 and change to snow, and we could have another snow event on Wednesday with a high of 30. Happy holidays. Here's an interesting tweet. The president making your 1st District Congressman a little bit more high profile by attacking his visit on Fox News. David Cicilline, as a ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, has been getting a lot of face time. I've never considered face time to be the litmus test of effectiveness as a congressman or even a state representative. But it is interesting that although Rhode Island sometimes feels like it's not engaged in the debate because things are fait accompli with Democratic perspective, at least you're getting a little bit of, I don't know, RI on the map in the middle of this circus, no doubt. Interesting, Jim Langevin, congressman from the 2nd District today, is saying that he's still holding out a thought on impeachment. It's not yet decided whether to vote for articles of impeachment. He wants to see them first. How about that for a little bit of diligence? Nicely done, Jim. In the meantime, this headline from this morning's activity, it was kind of a procedural circus and a weird way about going about business. The network has the latest.
A protester supporting President Trump interrupted House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler just seconds after the start of Monday's impeachment hearing. After the demonstrator was escorted out, Nadler told fellow lawmakers he was obligated to investigate President Trump because he argues he has broken his oath of office.
The evidence shows that Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States, has put himself before his country.
But the committee's ranking Republican again argued the entire proceeding is politically motivated.
They can't get over the fact Donald Trump is President of the United States, and they don't have a candidate that they think can beat him.
Today, lawyers from both sides are presenting evidence for and against impeachment. Democrats say the president withheld military aid in a White House meeting to pressure Ukraine to announce an investigation into political rival Joe Biden.
The scheme by President Trump was so brazen, so clear, supported by documents, actions, sworn testimony.
White House lawyers declined to participate in today's hearing in a sharply worded letter writing, quote, House Democrats have wasted enough of America's time with this charade.
President Trump sent a tweet Monday simply saying, witch hunt. Republicans argue Democrats are rushing the process and are failing to make a convincing case for impeachment.
The substantive case for impeaching President Trump as a result of an artificial, arbitrary, and political schedule relies heavily on ambiguous facts, presumptions, and speculation.
House Democrats are working to hold a full House vote on impeachment before Christmas.
Okay. By the way, full disclosure, I could be doing this a couple times. Well, I've got that thing that a lot of people have right now. But here's the thing that was interesting about the hearing. So you saw the lawyers, right? So Mr. Burke for the Democrats and Mr. Castor for the Republicans made presentations kind of summarizing where the investigations are. And then Mr. Burke, the Democratic summarizer, went to the dais to then Q&A. Mr. Castor is Republican, and they slipped in Mr. Goldman, the lawyer who asked questions in the Judiciary Committee. The Republicans were like, what? You can't do that. You can't have a guy that you say is a witness then come over, and it's kind of like, you know, throwing the ball and catching the ball at the same time. Tricky move. A lot of protests by the Republicans, but what it turned out to be, first at the beginning of this thing, I actually tweeted out that this thing looked like nothing but echo chambers. And I think average Americans like you and me would just look at this thing and say, all right, enough. We've heard this stuff before. But what turned out in the midday, as I'm looking at the clock right now in the early afternoon, was kind of a window into lawyers debating truth and law. So I think it was a pretty interesting exercise. How many folks are keyed in on this after the way it started today? I don't know. With a weather day like we had today, with the holidays coming, I'm not so sure. By the way, new news, the IG report, 400 pages came. This is the IG for the intelligence community, who says that the FBI effort to investigate the Trump campaign via the FISA warrants was not politically motivated and legit. The AG came out and said, well, it was awful thin and not legit. I would not have authorized it. So you got that going on. What's your take? Welcome.
My take
What's your
on
take
what
while I reach for the...
On impeachment? It's funny, I don't think anyone talks about like the critical issue. And the critical issue is Trump's intent. Assuming everything they say about Trump that he did, withheld money, asked for investigations, if his intent in doing that was to expose what he perceived as a crime of the prior administration, a violation of the Corrupt Foreign Practices Act, then everything he did was completely legal. However, if his intent in his actions was to affect the political process, and that was his motivation, and the investigation of the Bidens was just a pretext, then he has a problem. But the thing that will determine whether this was all a crime or not is something we will probably never know. And that was what was inside this man's mind at the time.
So where does that leave us? We're supposed to drop the ball, and because you don't think we can find an answer on intent? It seems to me that intent is something that comes through either direct or circumstantial evidence by interviewing the charged, or the people closest to the charged, and the president is preempting himself and anybody in his closest inner circle from participating in this thing.
So intent can be inferred. It's inferred all the time in criminal prosecutions. You have a defendant that doesn't take the stand. They're convicted all the time. Their intent is inferred from the facts. And I agree it can be inferred. And I understand that the Trump administration is denying the ability to determine what his intent was by withholding his administration officials from going to Congress. Now, that being said, I'm sure his response would be that it's a kangaroo court. I'm not going to expose myself and my administration to a process which is corrupted, which isn't fair. They're going to reach a predetermined result.
So do you buy into the kangaroo court notion?
I don't like the way the process has gone on.
What would you rather have seen?
I would have rather have seen the Republicans being able to call their own witnesses. I felt that,
which is something they'll be able to do at trial, right?
I get it, but we're talking about the House process right now. And maybe in that Senate process, the Trump administration will say, okay, we can get a fair shake here. I'm going to go in and have the legal show of the century in the Senate where I'll testify. And maybe that's what he'll do. Maybe he'll greenlight his administration officials to go into the Senate and give evidence. But I don't think now, and if I was advising him, I would say I would be very cautious about participating in the House process.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about this debate is that the House Democrats in Intel, not Judiciary, but in Intel, really provided what was the presenting link in the Nixon impeachment process and like, where there was an independent investigation, or at least one solicited by the Justice Department, through independent counsel to investigate and lay out the facts for the congressional hearings and the like. And that step is missing in all of this. Don't you think that the Attorney General here could have aided in that exercise and preempted the Republican attacks on the Democrats for having to kind of, from scratch, conduct their own investigation and then the hearings that I think they rightfully would be in step with?
Did the Democrats ask the Attorney General to conduct this investigation?
You know what? Debating myself, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. They probably felt like it was a fait accompli, that it wouldn't happen because the president has put the squash, and Bill Barr has certainly been running his script. So It seems to me that and Republicans were able to participate in the closed-door sessions before all this came down.
Yeah, they were. They didn't. They weren't able to call their own witnesses.
But what witnesses?
You know,
What witnesses do you think they would have called that would have aided and abetted the truth in this investigation? How about the President of the United States? He ain't showing up. The Secretary of State, the Director of National Security, and the Chief of Staff. Who else would they want?
Maybe if the issue here is what was in Trump's head, what was his intent, maybe to show a crime in the prior administration, to show that there is substantial evidence of a crime with Joe and Hunter Biden, and that would let us infer that Trump's intent was to get to the bottom of what he perceived as a crime.
But Trump's intent to get to the bottom of the crime should have proceeded to the Justice Department in the United States of America rather than putting the heavy on the Ukrainian president to conduct an investigation.
You're the president of Ukraine. You're going to take orders from a subordinate? I mean, that's what presidents do. Presidents talk to each other. If I was the president of Ukraine and some lackey from the Justice Department reached out to me, I might say I'd rather speak to the president of your country.
Oh, I would think the president of the United States could support an investigation that he had launched directly with the Justice Department, and if some turbulence and/or lack of cooperation from, say, President Zelensky occurred, then placing a phone call to say, hey, listen, not for nothing, I'm not involved, but it would be good for you to participate with my Justice Department, thank you very much, is a wholly different thing than initiating the conversation with the president of Ukraine, suggesting that on the back door he may want to talk to some people who may want to talk to him. Come on.
So you're talking about whether it was a right move or not. I don't think the whole thing was a right move. It should have been done differently.
Wasn't a perfect call, correct?
It wasn't a perfect call. Clearly not.
Aren't you frustrated as a Republican that he continues to hammer the idea that everything he did was perfect?
I don't agree that it was perfect, but what we're talking about is whether there was a crime. And there's a lot of times that non-perfect things are not.
We're talking about
crimes.
whether there was abuse of power, not just a crime.
High crime and misdemeanor.
Abuse of power is a concept.
Is it a constitutional standard for impeachment?
There's no definition of high crime and misdemeanor and abuse of power to any. I think if you were just walking down the street and randomly somebody asked you, hey, by the way, do you think presidential abuse of power would fit into a high crime and misdemeanor? I think most people would say unequivocally yes.
So what is abuse of power?
This is what they're trying to prove right now.
I know, but it's such a broad concept.
Abusing power, in other words, muscling another foreign leader to participate in an investigation that in the end your intent is to just find out information that would embarrass and or humiliate and or finish the campaign of the lead Democrat who's running for president.
If his intent was to finish Joe Biden's campaign, I think he's got major problems.
Well, actually, I would disagree with you on that one. I think Joe Biden's done. I think the
well, then maybe he was successful.
Exactly. It could be unilateral. Guess what? They killed each other politically. Because Joe Biden, I don't think he can carry the day. He's handling this Hunter Biden thing awfully.
So it goes to show there actually may be some truth to what Trump allegedly was going after.
I think there's an appearance problem. Heck, you've had a lot of those at the State House, right? Just watching those kind of scenarios go by. There are often things that are bad politics and bad appearance. Hunter Biden is the poster boy for bad judgment, no doubt about that.
And the whole thing isn't getting a fair shake, because anytime you pick up a news report, it's like discredited, conspiracy theory, no truth to it. You read that in the Boston Globe, the Providence Journal, the New York Times. No, there's something going on there. Something shady happened.
Well, no, he made a lot of money because he traded on his father's name.
Yeah, so the major networks
in this country. Wouldn't it be nice to stop that at the State House?
Agree completely.
Thank you. But I don't think it's criminal.
I don't count.
We're not prosecuting every nepotistic, patronizing profiteer at the State House.
But it was criminal if Joe Biden used the office of vice presidency.
I don't know why I'm pointing there, but
it's that way.
What the heck?
If Joe Biden used the office of the vice presidency to fire to get a prosecutor fired in Ukraine who is investigating Burisma, that's a violation. Right. That's abuse of power. Now, I don't know that happened, but there's a reasonable basis to believe that happened. Ergo, there's a reasonable basis for us to say that Trump may have wanted to get to the bottom of that crime, and that was his intent.
He took the wrong road. I thought we'd have a small conversation. That was pretty good. Some local stuff next.
You've heard me for the last 3 years, 4 years. pitching that how important Hasbro is to Pawtucket. We want to keep them here. We've given them multiple options over the years, and get nervous because we hear the rumors. I've heard in the past, they might be going. We are respecting them. They're a private business. We've made it clear that we want them here in Pawtucket. We believe that we have multiple sites that would fit their needs. This one now really enhances that because it would help that fortuitous development, as well as by getting the people in there, as you said, Dan, and also to them will have all of the amenities that they want.
Saying that Mayor Don Gregory has fought the good fight, you have to admire him, right?
Definitely.
In the city of Pawtucket. You have no specific role, meaning you, the General Assembly, have no specific role in this $400 million proposed development on the Seekonk River for a stadium. We can put some of the pictures up in case you haven't seen it. The video of this is kind of intriguing. It's pretty cool stuff, right? Soccer to the left, a landing to the right with commerce and retail kind of like a river walk to the north. The Apex building turns into a multi-purpose stadium and a hotel. However, that north site, the Apex site, is still being rumored as something that the state and local officials are trying to put under the nose of Hasbro. Hasbro is going to come looking. So, A, give me your gut check on what's going on in Pawtucket. Although the legislature, because you've already passed a tax incentive program for Pawtucket to kind of internally raise their own state dough on this. And no referendum is necessary from the people of Pawtucket. There's no vote. But I'd like your opinion on A, what's been proposed, and B, is the legislature thinking about that company and whether or not it's going to make an effort to keep it here?
Are you thinking about Hasbro? I think
so. A, tell me about what you think about the project.
So the genesis of this project, I'm sure they had their eye on this for a long time, but legislatively the genesis was a bill we passed, I believe, in June, which I opposed, and it was the TIF bill, tax increment financing. One critical component of the tax increment financing bill that we passed was that our eminent domain protections were severely weakened. After the Kelo v. New London decision, I think in 2002 or 2001, said that private property can be taken for economic development purposes, economic development by third parties. Many states outlawed this type of taking. In Rhode Island, we said, if we're going to do this type of taking, it has to be done by some legislative body, could be the Pawtucket City Council, and you have to pay 150% of market value. So if they take your house, they don't have to pay you the actual value, 150%. Right. So we reformed that. We allowed the Pawtucket Redevelopment Agency, non-elected bureaucrats, to have a taking, a quick taking, and we're no longer requiring 150% of market value be paid. It's 100% of market value. So I like this project. I think it's wonderful. I'm very concerned about much of it is being done under the gun of eminent domain. And I think eminent domain is a very, very scary thing when governments start using it cavalierly.
I agree completely, and I wish they'd had this whole thing figured out. At the same time, the Apex owners are sitting there with a thud of a building, disrupting any kind of progress there. And
it's their own property, and they can do what they want with it.
Well, you know what? You've got some property, and you don't mow the lawn, and you create an eyesore, and now my property next to you is devalued because your property looks like crap. There's sole propriety on your own property handling is not necessarily just your own business.
I get it. But if I have a building code violation, enforce it. This is, we don't like the use you're putting it to, which is a perfectly legal use under zoning, under state law, perfectly legal, but we think there's another use that can generate more economic activity.
It's a hard catch-22. There's no doubt about it. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But if they overpay taxpayer money without eminent domain, they get criticized for that. If they don't, whatever, they probably will be overpaying at some point. Reportedly, they're about $8 million apart, and so
it's a big number.
Big nut, no doubt about that. Quick though, General Assembly, is there any chatter about keeping Hasbro, or is that something that will address it when they create a crisis by saying they're leaving?
Yeah, it's probably, we do govern by crisis. I'm sure they're having conversations with the Democratic leadership and the administration. They're probably going to come to us with something. I'm always concerned about corporate welfare. Much of this project I do like because it's infrastructure. I think government has a role in infrastructure, building infrastructure, building a beautiful river walk. I'd be concerned about cash payouts or us building a building for Hasbro. They're a large Fortune 500 company. They should be able to fund their own
It's interesting because I'm completely on your page. The economic development strategy and mantra from the Raimondo administration is to pick winners and losers and buy jobs versus having fertile ground that creates them somewhat organically. Job retention is a whole nother challenge, and Hasbro is one of the big retention worries that the state has. So it's not as easy.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as easy.
I get it, but we can't get distracted by the shiny things. Sometimes when you have a centrally planned economic model like we do in this state, there's shiny little things. There's Wexford, there's this project, and we can wave it and say, look, it's working, it's working. But in order to do a proper economic analysis, you need to focus back to 50,000 feet and look at the numbers, look at GDP, look at the retention of young people, look at total wealth in the state. And in many respects, all those numbers are going down. So we can, jingle these shiny things in front of us, but any economist worth of their salt is going to look at the macroeconomics of the state, which I think will only be repaired through the fertile ground you spoke about.
I agree completely. When we come back, that macro look, he's applying it. He got a win. Tell you about that, and it's developing analysis when we come back. Stay with us. The Minority Leader and I have actually had two conversations here and many on the radio about IGT Twin River, which is now in evaluation. He fought for a consultancy. He got that approved by the Joint Committee on Legislative Services. So the taxpayers, thankfully, are paying for, not some volunteer money to screw it up, are paying for an evaluation. 60 seconds. You are in a timetable that will bear fruit in January, you think?
Yes, so let me be clear. The taxpayers are paying for it, but it's through the JCLS budget, which is appropriated every year.
Yeah.
We're
It's
not
new
raising
money.
taxes. We're
Not
going to
new
have
money.
a few
Good
less
point.
legislative grant checks are going to go out, and we're going to get this critical study.
Amen, brother.
This critical study that deals with $8 billion in state
Very
revenue
good
over
points.
the
Not
next
new
20
dough.
years.
Not new dough.
So is it just me? It's other members of the Finance Committee, Representative Quattrocchi and Price, who are Republicans, and we worked with the Speaker to get this report done. It is currently in the process. We hope to have it back by January 15th or January 30th at the latest. Christensen and Company, excellent firm, responsible firm. They have everything that we've given them, and we're working together right now to get it done.
Hard though, when I look at some of the specs, there's hardly a consultant who actually applied for the job that isn't intertwined in the business already and doesn't have IGT or Twin River as a vendor / consultant in their portfolio in the recent past. You just hope you can get independent review from this company so that you can. I applaud the effort. I mean, it's almost like a zero-sum game to go down to find the actual complete independent entity. Well, that entity wouldn't know anything about the business.
Agreed.
Right?
This vendor is clean. This vendor is going to do an independent job. And this vendor's job is to give independent advice to governments. And if they don't do that for us, they're done in the industry. It is in their financial interest to be as objective and as good of a business partner as possible to us.
I'll trust your instinct on that. Good effort. Again, this man made this move and brought some effort for objectivity on the House side. The Senate will read the report, I'm sure. But the burning issue of the day, obviously, is the tree. Are you artificial or are you real?
I'm a real tree guy.
You're a real tree guy?
I'm a real tree guy.
Do you support the governor's artificialness and putting the artificial tree up?
I don't support or not support it. I think there's other things to talk about. I would have put a real tree, but it's not something that I think should lead the segment. So I'm glad we're doing it at the end.
Nothing else?
Nothing else.
Final word when we come back. Notwithstanding some of the substantial debate and discussion I had with the Minority Leader, I was thinking maybe I could bait him into a Christmas tree controversy, the sequel. Maybe the Republicans would do something, like put up their own tree. But alas, he is too sturdy, stable, and focused on the big picture to take the bait. Doggone it. Doggone it. You guys, we will see you tomorrow night on the radio at 3 on WPRO. Good night.